It was a cold, moonless night when everything changed for me. I was driving home after a long day at work, the hum of my car's engine the only sound on an otherwise deserted road. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a woman in a torn wedding dress stumbled into the headlights of my car. Her face was pale with fear, her hair disheveled, and her dress muddy as though she had been running through the woods for hours. Before I could react, she lunged toward my car, yanked open the passenger door, and practically collapsed onto the seat beside me. "Please," she gasped, her voice trembling with desperation. "Don't let him find me. Please don't hand me over to him. He'll kill me." I froze, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who was this woman? And who was chasing her? Before I could even ask, the distant roar of an approaching vehicle broke the silence. A sleek black car screeched to a halt behind us, its headlights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. A man stepped out, tall, menacing, and radiating anger. He strode toward my car, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. His voice boomed through the night air. "Give her back. She belongs to me." My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just some random misunderstanding. It felt like something out of a nightmare. The man's piercing gaze locked onto mine, and I could see the fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. What choice did I have? Hand over this terrified stranger or risk becoming part of whatever dangerous game they were playing? As the seconds ticked by, the tension in the air grew unbearable. Little did I know this moment would set off a chain of events that would test every ounce of courage I thought I didn't possess. As the woman in the wedding dress clung to the passenger seat, her breaths coming in shallow gasps, I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. My mind raced with questions. What had she done? Who was chasing her? And why did this man think he had the right to demand her back? The headlights of his sleek black car illuminated the narrow road behind us, casting long, menacing shadows that seemed to creep closer with every passing second. Then, he emerged from the darkness, a tall, imposing figure whose presence alone felt like a threat. His sharp suit and polished shoes contrasted sharply with the chaos unfolding around him, but it was his eyes that struck me most. They were cold, calculating, and filled with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Hand her over," he barked, his voice slicing through the night air like a blade. "She's my fiancée." Fiancé? The word echoed in my head as I glanced at the trembling woman beside me. She shook her head frantically, mouthing the words, "Please, no," her wide eyes pleading for salvation. I turned back to the man, trying to steady my voice despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I don't know what's going on here," I said firmly, "but I'm not handing anyone over until I understand the full story." His jaw tightened, and for a moment there was silence, broken only by the faint hum of crickets and the distant rustle of leaves. Then, without warning, his demeanor shifted. Gone was the composed facade. Now, raw fury radiated from him. He stepped closer to my car, slamming his fist against the hood with enough force to make both of us jump. "Don't test me," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "If you don't hand her over right now, both of you will regret it." The threat hung heavy in the air, and I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just some petty argument or domestic dispute. It was something darker, more sinister. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I weighed my options. Should I confront him? Try to drive away? Or comply with his demands and hope for the best? But before I could decide, the woman grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "He means it," she whispered hoarsely. "He'll kill us both if you give me to him." Her words sent another wave of panic through me. What had I gotten myself into? This stranger's life, and possibly mine, now depended on the choices I made in the next few moments. The man outside leaned down, peering into the car window with a predatory smirk. "You're making a big mistake," he said slowly, enunciating each word. "But fine. If you want to play hero, we'll see how far that gets you." With that, he straightened up and took a step back, pulling out a phone from his pocket. My stomach sank as I realized he wasn't bluffing. He was calling someone, likely reinforcements. Whoever this man was, he clearly had resources, and I was outmatched. The drive back to my house was a blur of panic and indecision. The woman in the wedding dress, whose name I still didn't know, sat silently beside me, her hands clasped tightly together as if praying for deliverance. Every so often, she would glance over her shoulder through the rear window, checking for any sign of pursuit. I could feel her fear like a tangible weight in the car, pressing down on both of us. My mind raced with questions. Who exactly was this man? Why did he want her so badly? And how deep was I willing to go to protect someone I barely knew? When we finally arrived at my home, I thought we might have a moment to breathe, to figure out what to do next. But fate had other plans. As soon as I stepped out of the car, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. It was an unknown number. Hesitating for only a second, I answered it, hoping against hope that it wasn't who I feared it would be. "Listen carefully," came the cold, calculated voice on the other end. It was him, the man from earlier. "You made a grave mistake by interfering." His tone sent chills down my spine, but it wasn't until I heard muffled sobs in the background that my blood ran cold. That voice, I'd recognize it anywhere. It was my wife's. "What have you done?" I demanded, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Oh, nothing, that's yet," he replied mockingly. "But unless you hand over the girl within the hour, your precious wife won't live to see tomorrow." "No!" The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. Desperation clawed at my chest as I realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about protecting a stranger anymore. Now, the life of the person I loved most was on the line. The sound of my wife crying softly in the background shattered whatever resolve I had left. Each sob felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my heart. I looked toward the house where my wife should have been waiting safely inside. Instead, I imagined her tied up somewhere dark, terrified, and alone because of my actions. Guilt overwhelmed me. If anything happened to her, I would never forgive myself. Yet how could I abandon the woman sitting in my car? A woman who trusted me enough to risk everything by jumping into a stranger's vehicle. She hadn't asked for this nightmare any more than my wife deserved to be caught in its web. "We'll solve this," I said aloud. Though whether I was trying to reassure the woman or myself, I couldn't tell. Turning back to her, I saw the fear in her eyes mirrored my own. "Stay here," I instructed firmly. "Don't move until I come back." As I walked toward the house, every step felt heavier than the last. My mind flickered between images of my wife's tear-streaked face and the haunted expression of the woman in the wedding dress. Both needed saving, but time was running out. And with each passing second, the stakes grew higher. What kind of man am I thought bitterly, if I can't even protect the people closest to me? The dim light of a single bulb swung back and forth, casting eerie shadows across the cold, damp walls of the room. Both my wife and the woman in the wedding dress were bound to chairs, their faces pale with fear. The man, the one who had been chasing us, stood in the center of the room, his arms crossed and his lips curled into a sinister smile. His presence filled the space like a suffocating fog, every movement deliberate, every word laced with menace. You see, he began, pacing slowly between the two women. This is what happens when people refuse to cooperate. He stopped in front of the bride-to-be, tilting her chin up forcefully so she would meet his gaze. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she trembled under his grip. You've caused me far too much trouble already, he sneered. Then turning to my wife, he added, And you're just collateral damage. Pity your husband wasn't smart enough to save you. My chest tightened as I watched helplessly from the corner where I was tied up. The ropes around my wrists dug deeper with each futile attempt to break free. How had it come to this? What kind of nightmare had we stumbled into? My mind raced for a solution, but all I could think about was the sound of my wife's muffled sobs and the desperate look in the bride's eyes. Please. The woman in the wedding dress finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll do whatever you want. Just let them go. Her plea hung in the air, unanswered until she gathered the courage to continue. My family owes you money. That's why I agreed to marry you. If I don't, they'll kill my parents. But I didn't know you'd hurt anyone else. She broke down into uncontrollable sobs, her body shaking violently. For the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation in the man's expression, though it quickly vanished behind his mask of cruelty. Save your sob stories, he spat. You made your choice when you ran away. Now everyone pays the price. His words struck me like a hammer blow. This wasn't just some twisted game, it was a web of desperation and betrayal that none of us could escape unscathed. As the reality of our situation sank in, I realized something crucial. I couldn't rely on strength alone to get us out of this. It would take more than brute force. It would take cunning, resolve, and perhaps even a miracle. Suddenly, the bride looked at me, her tear-streaked face illuminated briefly by the swaying light. Don't let him win, she whispered hoarsely. Those 4 words ignited something within me, a spark of defiance I hadn't felt before. For the first time since this ordeal began, I understood what I needed to do. Failure wasn't an option. Not when the lives of the people I loved most depended on me. For a moment, I felt utterly powerless. The weight of the situation crushed me. 2 lives hung in the balance, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see a way out. My mind spiraled into self-loathing as I replayed every misstep that had led us here. Why hadn't I acted sooner? Why hadn't I been stronger? The man's cruel laughter echoed in my ears, mocking my inability to protect those I loved most. You're pathetic, he sneered, pacing back and forth like a predator circling its prey. A real man would make a choice. His words stung more than I cared to admit. Was he right? Had I failed them both by hesitating? I glanced at my wife, her tear-streaked face pale with fear, then at the woman in the wedding dress, whose eyes pleaded for salvation. Both deserved better than this. But what could I do? I was just one man against someone who seemed untouchable, someone who thrived on intimidation and violence. And yet, amidst the chaos, a memory surfaced, a conversation with an old friend years ago. We'd been sitting in a dimly lit bar after a particularly rough day, and I'd confided in him about feeling inadequate, weak. He'd leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. Strength doesn't come from you, he'd said. It comes from your reason. Find your why, and you'll find your power. At the time, I hadn't fully understood what he meant, but now, trapped in this nightmare, his words hit me like a lightning bolt. My why wasn't complicated, it was staring me in the face. These women weren't just victims, they were people who trusted me to fight for them. If I gave up now, if I let despair consume me, then I truly would be the coward he accused me of being. No, not today. Summoning every ounce of courage I possessed, I rose to my feet, ignoring the sharp pain in my wrists where the ropes dug into my skin. The man turned to me, his smirk widening as though amused by my defiance. "What are you going to do?" he taunted. "Beg for mercy?" "No," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I'm done begging." Before he could react, I lunged forward, driving my shoulder into his chest with all the force I could muster. The impact sent him stumbling backward, his smug expression replaced by shock. Seizing the moment, I swung my fist, connecting squarely with his jaw. The sound of bone meeting flesh reverberated through the room, followed by a grunt of pain as he collapsed to the floor. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the woman in the wedding dress gasped, her voice trembling with disbelief. You actually did it." The chaos of the night began to settle as the man who had terrorized us lay unconscious on the floor, his cruel smirk finally erased. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to breathe. Deep, shaky breaths that seemed to pull me back from the edge of despair. My wife clung to me tightly, her tears soaking into my shirt, but she was safe, alive. And so was the woman in the wedding dress, who now stood trembling by the door, her eyes wide with a mix of relief and disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of emotion. "I don't know how to repay you for this." She hesitated, glancing at the man sprawled out on the floor before continuing. "I never wanted any of this. Not the marriage, not the lies. I just wanted to protect my family." Her words hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the desperation that had driven her to flee, and the lengths someone else would go to control her life. "You don't owe me anything," I replied softly, though part of me still struggled to process everything that had happened. "Just promise me one thing, start over. Build the life you deserve." She nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips despite the exhaustion etched across her face. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the doorway. Watching her leave, I couldn't help but feel a pang of hope. For her, for all of us. Maybe endings didn't have to be permanent. Maybe they could be beginnings instead. As the sound of her footsteps faded, my wife leaned closer, her hand brushing against mine. "You saved us," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You became my hero tonight." Her words struck a chord deep within me, stirring emotions I hadn't fully acknowledged until now. Hero? Me? The same man who had doubted his own strength, who had let fear paralyze him for so long? It seemed impossible, yet here we were, alive, together, and free because of choices I'd made when it mattered most. Exhausted but unable to sleep, I stepped outside once everything had been settled. The cool night air washed over me as I sank onto the steps of my porch, staring up at the moon hanging low in the sky. Its pale light bathed the world in a soft glow, casting long shadows across the yard. Somewhere in the distance, crickets chirped, their rhythmic song blending with the gentle rustle of leaves swaying in the breeze. For a while, I simply sat there, letting the quiet envelop me. So much had changed in such a short span of time, not just externally, but within me as well. I thought about the man I used to be, hesitant, unsure, always waiting for someone else to take charge. And then I thought about the man I had become tonight, the man who had faced down a monster to save the people he loved. What had sparked that transformation? Was it courage, determination, or something deeper? In that moment, clarity dawned on me like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a storm cloud. Strength wasn't something you were born with or acquired overnight. It was forged in moments of necessity, shaped by the reasons that drove you to act. Love had been my reason. Love for my wife. Love for a stranger who trusted me enough to leap into my car. It wasn't about being fearless. It was about finding something worth fighting for. No one is truly weak, I said aloud, the words spilling out before I could stop them. They just haven't found their reason to be strong yet. As I spoke, I realized how true those words were, not just for me, but for everyone. Life tests us in ways we can't predict, forcing us to dig deep and uncover reserves of resilience we didn't know existed. Sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what you're truly capable of. Behind me, the house stood silent, a sanctuary reclaimed after a night of terror. Ahead, the horizon stretched endlessly, vast and full of possibility. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I would face them, not as the man I had been, but as the man I had become. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.